Hey everybody, this is Tommy Dimsdale with the Dimsdale Debate. I want to thank you for clicking on to our weekly show. And this week we're going to be talking about the phrase separation of church and state. We're going to be finding out what its origins were, where it came from, and why taking it out of context has had such a detrimental effect on the United States society and our culture. So anyways guys, going to be an information-packed show. Y'all hang on to your private sector because here comes the Dimsdale Debate. Alright guys, so at one time or another, I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, you can't do that because of separation between church and state. You can't have that nativity scene in front of the courthouse. You can't have the Ten Commandments in the courthouse. You can't have In God We Trust in the schools, and you definitely can't allow a public school teacher to carry a Bible into the school with them. All of these things have fallen victim to the misconstruing of the phrase separation of church and state. So, to first off understand, why or how to combat this, we're going to have to look at the origins of separation in church and state. So if anyone ever tells you this, the very first thing that you can say is, well, in what legal founding document was separation of church and state found in? And of course, most of the time they don't know. They can probably make a few guesses. Was it in the Constitution? No. Was it in the Declaration of Independence? No, not in there either. How about the Bill of Rights? No, it's not in there either. So where did this come from, and how has something that wasn't even in founding legal documents had such an impact on our nation and our society today? Well, this was something that came from Thomas Jefferson, one of his writings to the Danbury Baptist Church. The Danbury Baptist Church had written to him, and they were really concerned about the Bill of Rights. Now, as modern-day Christians today, it's kind of hard for us to understand, why would a church have a problem with the Bill of Rights? There's a lot of really good things in there. You've got the right to free speech, right to religion, right to bear arms. You've got all your privacy rights, and your states' rights are included in that list. So why would a church have a problem with it? Well, we've got to start to understand and kind of put on the mindset that some of these people had back, 250 years ago. Back then, everything that was in the Bill of Rights was viewed as natural law, also known as God's law in that time. And everything that was in here they were inalienable rights. So you've got the Constitution, which is a fantastic document, a wonderful document, and as a matter of fact, it's lasted longer than any constitution in the world. But at the same time, it still is man-made, and it is governmental. It's a governmental document. And you have the Bill of Rights tacked on to the end of it. So the reason that the Danbury Baptist Church were so apprehensive about this was the fact that you've got a law document, you've got man's law, and you've got God's law right beside it tacked onto it. So it makes it look as if those rights that are listed are coming from the government and not from God. That's a very important distinction here that we have to understand. And so Jefferson wrote back to them on November 7th, 1801, and told them, guys, don't worry, there will be a clear wall of separation between church and state. So obviously, we can see from this that the real intent of separation between church and state wasn't to protect the government from the church, but in fact the opposite. It was made to protect the church from the government. Jefferson was telling us, guys, don't worry about this. The government is not going to encroach on your God-given rights. The government's not going to attack your right to free speech. It's not going to attack the way you worship. It's not going to encroach on your Second Amendment or any of these things. And he was reassuring them that that was the case. And looking back on it today, I'm very glad that they kept the Bill of Rights and wrote them in the first place. So, one thing I really like to do on this, I do like to tell this certain biblical story, and it's about King Uzziah. Now, King Uzziah of Israel, he was a great king, and you can find this story in 2 Chronicles 26, 16 through 20 if you want to go research it for yourself. And this is a perfect example of separation of church and state in the Bible. A lot of people don't think that the Bible talks about economics or politics at all, but it actually does. So, if we start reading in 2 Corinthians 26:16, But after Uzziah became powerful, his pride led to his downfall. He was unfaithful to the Lord his God and entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense. Azariah, the priest, with 80 other courageous priests of the Lord, followed him in. They confronted King Uzziah and said, "It is not right for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord. That is for the priests, the descendants of Aaron, who have been consecrated to burn incense. Leave the sanctuary, for you have been unfaithful, and you will not be honored by the Lord God." Now we can obviously see right here that you've got a governmental entity, the king, is encroaching on what God set apart for the church to do. The church has come in beside him and said, "No, your government, you're the king, you stay out of this. This is our territory, and God ordained us to burn incense at the altar." Now you can look at this in a couple different ways as well. This is also the reason why welfare is not going to work, and it never will work, because it doesn't make sense biblically. If it doesn't make sense biblically, it won't make sense economically. The reason being is God has 4 ordainments in our lives, and that is, you've got the church, you've got the individual, you've got the family, and you've got the government. And each one of these has certain responsibilities, and certain responsibilities that they're not to take on from the church or from each other. The government is here to protect our rights as a whole, but the church, one of its main jobs is to help the poor. And so the government definitely can't encroach on that, just as we see in 2 Chronicles what happens when the government encroaches on something that is a responsibility of the church. Let's continue. Uzziah, who had a censer in his hand, ready to burn incense, became angry. And while he was raging at the priests in their presence before the incense altar in the Lord's temple, leprosy broke out on his forehead. When Azariah, the chief priest, and all other priests looked at him, they saw that he had leprosy on his forehead, so they hurried him out. Indeed, he himself was eager to leave because the Lord had afflicted him. Now, I think this is a pretty blatant example that the government is not to impose on anything that the church does. Now, you might be wondering, well, why is there a separation of church and state? There is a separation of church and state, but not in the way that liberals have misconstrued it today. The separation of church and state is exactly the reason that the Pilgrims and our founding fathers fled from England, because over there you had the Church of England, and the Church of England controlled the government of England. And this is wrong. You do not give the church authority to wield the sword of prosecution against anyone. That is very dangerous. It leads to corruption, and you're giving that power to the church and to men to decide. And basically what happens is, let's say that I'm a Tea Partier and I believe in less government. Back in that time, I would have been believing in less church and would have been a heretic because of it. And if you didn't follow the law, not only were you, a lawbreaker, but a sinner as well. So it's very important that the church does not have the sword of prosecution or any governmental powers. But that doesn't mean that we can't have prayer in schools, or that a teacher can't take the Bible to school with her, or that we can't have the 10 Commandments at our courthouses or a nativity scene out in front of county council. Doesn't mean any of that. So once again, guys, I hope that this has been an informative video for you, and I want you to take this back to your church and bring it up to your pastor and say, "Hey, check this out! I learned something really cool." Or bring it up to your Sunday school. Once again, I do classes at churches. I can either do a sermon or an 8-week course that I love doing, especially with youth, but we'll do it with any age group. And if you really like these videos and you want more of this and you'd like to see a more in-depth discussion, definitely leave me a comment down below, and I'll get in touch with you and be very happy to set up a class for that. But anyways, guys, this is Tommy Dimsdale with the Dimsdale Debate. Like us, share this, subscribe to our channel, and make sure you hit the little notification button down there that's going to allow you to get notifications whenever we post a new video. But anyways, guys, y'all keep fighting the good fight, and happy 4th.